Okay, so I'm doing my weekly meal prep. I usually prep every 4 days or so. 4 days is about the max that I can go before I get bored of the same foods. And for a lot of my prep, I actually use my air fryer. It's really quick, super easy to clean. I don't have to add any extra oil to get good flavor out of my vegetables or frozen vegan meats. So for me, it's kind of an all-around win-win situation. I've had a lot of people ask me questions about how I meal prep, how I prepare things. So I figured I'd make this video to give you guys a little background on my air fryer itself and how I utilize it to stay on track with my meal prep. So here's the basket for the air fryer. There's a little insert. You push this button to remove it, to pull out. It's all non-stick, so it's very easy to clean. You can see I've got some broccoli and cauliflower pieces in there from the last batch. But I'm going to start a new batch. This is just fresh broccoli and cauliflower, no oil, no seasonings. For me personally, I prefer to add my seasonings post-cooking. I find that when I add them before cooking, especially without oil, they don't stick very well. Also, the taste is kind of diminished. So if I add it at the end is when I get the most flavor, which leads to me using less salt and seasoning overall. Beneficial if you're meal prepping. Once I've got my vegetables in here, I'm just going to shake it around a little bit, make sure it's evenly distributed. Then we're going to put it into the air fryer. As you can see, I put my air fryer on just a little cookie sheet to protect the countertop. I haven't had any issues with it burning the counter, but better safe than sorry. To set this, I'm going to hit chips and then power. And that will run for 20 minutes. So I'll check on these in about 10 minutes to see where they are and see if I need to change the temperature. Usually at 10 minutes it's just starting to brown and you just need to give them a quick shake to spread them out a little bit more, turn them around a little bit to get more heat on the sides that maybe aren't cooking just yet. Okay, so while the broccoli and cauliflower is going, I'm going to start roasting my tomatoes. First step to roasting your tomatoes is you want to set your oven to 425 degrees. Let it preheat. Next is to get your tomatoes going. So I'm just going to spread them out here on a cookie sheet that's been covered with parchment paper, which will help with cleanup later. Alright, now for the tomatoes, I do use a little oil because I don't want them to just completely burn. A little char is nice, but not totally just scorched. So the oil helps with that and also gives them some nice color and just a little bit of flavor. To add the oil, I use a pump aerator spray bottle like this one. This way I can use maybe 2 tablespoons of oil total and coat everything evenly. So it helps me cut down the amount of oil I need to use to get the same effect and flavor that I'm looking for. Just gonna pump this a couple times. Alright, so once it's pumped up, and you'll know because it'll get harder and harder to push down, I just start spraying it evenly across the tomatoes. And that's it. Give them a little shake. Now the other thing I do like to do is add just a little bit of sea salt. Go a bit onto the tomatoes. Alright, and these are ready for the oven. They're going to be in there for about 25 minutes. I usually check on the tomatoes the first time after about 10 minutes, just like with the other veggies. And then 5 minutes thereafter, just to keep them from getting too well done. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes for my veggies. So I'm going to take those out. Here you can see they're getting a little bit brown around the edges. Nice and bright green, the way you get with steamed veggies, which is ideal because the brighter the color, the more vitamins that you still have in your vegetables. So these guys, I would say maybe another 5 minutes before I consider them done. That way they'll be just a little more tender, but still have plenty of crunch. just restart that. There we go. And we'll let it go for another 5 minutes. Now, in addition to my veggies and tomatoes, I've got some quinoa going. This is just about done soaking up the last of the liquid. I make my quinoa with water, and then I usually season it using garlic, lemon pepper. Sometimes I add uncooked scallion or shallots in there to give it a little texture. Nothing too flavorful, just enough to give it a little bit of pizzazz because I'm going to be combining it with a lot of other foods and I don't want the flavors to clash. So the next thing I'm making is some asparagus. I'm going to prepare it the same way I'm preparing the broccoli and cauliflower, and I'll probably also use the same seasoning. So these will go into the air fryer as soon as our broccoli and cauliflower is done. Okay, so here is the first batch of broccoli and cauliflower. You can see we've got some nice color going on, just a little brown around the edges, but still very springy, very green, so they don't taste overcooked or mushy. And they're not dried out the way you can sometimes get in the oven. That, combined with the fact that it's a lot faster and easier for me to put these in the air fryer versus waiting for them to roast in the oven, is one of the reasons why I love using my air fryer for food prep. I'm going to chop up a shallot to add a little bit of flavor to my quinoa. That's about done. If you don't like the taste of raw shallots, or you prefer, you know, cooked onions, caramelized onions, what have you, those are also good to add. You can roast them alongside your tomatoes, for example, and then just chop them up when you're done and stir them into the quinoa. Okay, so here's the quinoa. I've added my shallots, which I'm just going to stir in here. This was 4 cups of quinoa uncooked, which you can see expands quite a bit once it's completely done. Flavor, and I'm going to add a little bit of garlic salt and lemon pepper. Lemon pepper. The good thing about quinoa is with meal prep, if you're using a grain like this, it cooks pretty quickly, it's fairly simple to do, and it keeps for a long time. So you don't have to worry about it going bad if you don't use it in the first couple days. You can keep it in the fridge and you should be fine. So here is the asparagus before going into the air fryer. You can see it's fresh and bright green. So I'll give you guys a look at what these look like as soon as they come out. We're going to use the same settings as we did for the broccoli. Close it. It's on 400. I'll check after the first 10 minutes and then every 5 minutes after. Take a look at our roasted tomatoes. So this was about 15 minutes. At 425 degrees. You can see they look pretty good. I don't want them to be too drained of liquids. I want them to be a little bit juicy still because it helps add moisture to your prepped meals, which you may find is a big deal. In my experience, prepped meals being in the fridge tends to dry them out a little bit and they can become a little dry and tasteless. So having an ingredient like roasted tomatoes, which has a lot of natural liquid, helps make them a little more flavorful and add more moisture to your dish. Alright, so it's time to check on the asparagus. Alright, so just like the broccoli, you can see that it stayed bright green, more like a steamed vegetable, a little dried out, but not, you know, completely ancient. There's some browning along the edges, but all in all, it looks pretty good. Okay, so next I'm going to make my vegan meats here. I've got some Gardein meatballs. These are one of my favorite things. I was a little worried to try them in the air fryer at first because it's very specific about making them in sauce, but they actually come out pretty good. So I'm going to take 2 containers of these, put them in there all together, shake it to get it even, and back in the air fryer. So these are going in at 380 degrees, which is the chicken setting, for 20 minutes, which is the default. These will typically be done in 10 to 12 minutes though, so I'm gonna keep a close eye on them to make sure I don't overcook. Okay, so ready to check on the meatballs, and there they go. These look pretty good to me. I'm gonna give them another 2 minutes just to make sure they're cooked all the way through. For the record, these have been in for 10 minutes already, so I think after another 2 minutes, they'll be perfect. This is the last item I'm making for my meal prep this week, sweet and sour porkless bites. I personally prefer them without the sauce. Without the sauce, and then I measure out my own sauce to use with them so I can keep a tighter grip on the number of calories per serving. So just like the meatballs, I'm gonna put these in the air fryer. These typically take 8 minutes to cook, so I'm gonna check on them after the first 5 minutes just to make sure they're not overcooking, and then I'll probably give them another 2 minutes after that. Usually these are done within 10 minutes tops. Okay, so the porkless bites are going in with the chicken preset, 370 degrees, 15 minutes. I'm gonna check on these after the first 5, maybe 7 minutes has passed. Just to make sure they're not overcooking, and then every 2 minutes after that until I feel confident that they're done. All right, so these guys are just about done. You can hear there's a little crispiness going on in there, which I like. I'm gonna give these another 2 minutes, and then I think they will be perfect, and I'll be ready to start assembling my bowls. So now I'm gonna start assembling my bowls. I'm gonna start with lunch first, which is the porkless bites, asparagus, lentils, and quinoa. Let's see. I need 1 cup of lentils. So I like having lots of carbs in my lunch because it's the last meal that I will typically eat before I hit the gym for my workout. If I'm doing a heavy load day, something like leg day, that's especially important because carbs are where the energy comes from. And I need lots of energy to get through that. Next, I need half a cup of quinoa. I'll add some asparagus. I'm eyeballing my asparagus. I'm not as stringent when it comes to my veggies because, well, the more veggies usually the better. Cup per serving. Now, the longer you meal prep, the easier it'll get for you to start eyeballing portions. I think in the beginning, it's definitely important for you to measure everything just because a lot of times what we think a cup is way more or way less. So it's helpful to see the actual amounts, and that'll educate your eyes. So when you're in a restaurant or something like that and you're kind of guesstimating, your totals will be more accurate. Next is the pork or porkless bites. So these are gonna come to 9 pieces per serving. So I'm just gonna count them out. Lunch, I've got 1 cup of lentils, half a cup of quinoa, 1 serving of the Gardein porkless bites, and approximately 1 cup asparagus. I'm gonna add some lemon juice to these. Flavor up the asparagus a little bit. So also sink nicely into the quinoa and even the lentils. Meatballs. I'm doing 4 meatballs per meal. I'm gonna cut these in half. It'll lay a little bit better in the container, but I also find that visually seeing more food makes it feel like more food. When you're doing meal prep especially, or when you're on some kind of diet, anytime you're restricting calories or you're trying to change your eating habits, your brain and what your brain sees are just as important as the actual calories and what you're eating. If food looks unappetizing or it doesn't look like enough food, then that's gonna affect your mentality and how you feel about it. So these will start with 2 cups of spinach. Okay, so we've got our spinach nest all set up. Maybe that's a little heavy. Okay, next I've got 1 cup of broccoli and cauliflower mix. Our meatballs. So this is 1, 2. Right, and now I'm gonna add my roasted tomatoes. A cup. And the last ingredient is nutritional yeast. These got 1 tablespoon each. And so this will be dinner. We've got Gardein meatless meatballs, half a cup of roasted tomatoes, 1 cup of our broccoli cauliflower mix, 2 cups of spinach, and 1 tablespoon of nutritional yeast.